But let's move on. Let's move on in the program because there's been a significant development today, viewers. The Modi government has announced a white paper on the UPA's handling of the economy in contrast to its own record in office. The NDA particularly wants to compare its own record with the previous 10 years of the UPA between 2004 and 2014. The NDA has talked about how an economy down on fundamentals was brought out of distress while also producing record performance on infrastructure and beneficiary schemes. The NDA's white paper on UPA suggests that under the UPA, the country had dipped into the fragile five. But under the NDA, it has peaked to become one of the top 5 economies. There was double-digit inflation, which has been brought down to little over 5%. Record foreign exchange reserves of 620 plus billion now, as opposed to earlier. The NDA says that the UPA era was defined by scams. 2G scams to 3 lakh crore revenue of telecom providers was siphoned off and given to various individuals on a dodgy basis. The resources devolved to states 3.8 times higher than earlier, countering what some opposition parties have been saying was a discriminatory attitude towards southern states in particular by the Modi government. The NDA says the pace of national highway construction is 2.3 times higher than 2015. The Congress has criticized the decision by the NDA to release a white paper on the UPA to contrast how the economy is doing now as a political gimmick. And in fact, they brought out their own black paper to counter this, highlighting price rise and obviously also on how the UPA did better on LPG, petrol, diesel, mustard oil price regulation. The price of atta and milk, they have pointed out how prices have gone up. Cylinder price, they say, is up 120%. Rest hover in the 30 to 70% area. The Prime Minister, meanwhile, took a jibe at the Congress, saying that their black paper is actually a kala tika or good omen on the economy under the NDA. That's how he's taking it. If we have that soundbite, let's quickly play it out.
आज देश पिछले 10 साल में समृद्धि के नए नए शिखर सर कर रहा है। एक भव्य दिव्य वातावरण बना है, उसको नजर न लग जाए, इसलिए काला टीका करने का आज प्रयास हुआ है। मैं उसके लिए भी खड़गे जी का बहुत धन्यवाद करता हूं, ताकि इस हमारी प्रगति की यात्रा को कोई नजर न लग जाए। ये नजर न लग जाए, इसलिए आपने आज जो काला टीका किया है, मैं तो सोच रहा था सब काले कपड़ों में आएंगे, लेकिन शायद काला जादू खिंचते 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 ब्लैक पेपर तक चला गया है। लेकिन फिर भी मैं उसका भी स्वागत करता हूं, क्योंकि जब भी अच्छी बात होती है, काला टीका नजर न लग जाए, इसलिए बहुत जरूरी होता है। और उस पवित्र काम को, और आज जिस उम्र के हैं, उस व्यक्ति जब ये काम करता है तो जरा अच्छा रहता है। तो मैं इसके लिए भी आपका आभार व्यक्त करता हूं।
Well, viewers, the Prime Minister blowing off the Congress's black paper, as it called it, in response to the NDA's white paper as insignificant. But there are questions that need to be posed to the Bharatiya Janata Party, and who better than the Vice President of the party to answer them. Let's go straight across to Mr. Baijayant Panda. Thank you, Mr. Panda, for speaking to me. Of course, Mr. Panda is the Vice President of the BJP. And I'm going to begin by asking you some straight and pointed questions, as I always do, Mr. Panda. So I'm going to ask you perhaps the most fundamental one. Does the white paper that has been put out by the NDA serve any purpose, any practical purpose, other than being a vector for the government's version of its own economic performance before the 2024 general elections?
First of all, it is not the government's version, it is a matter of historical record. And I think it is important for Indians to understand this. Now, Rahul, you and I were adults back in the UPA era, and we have heard and read and gone into some of the details of the many scams which let India down very badly. But let's understand that there are tens of millions of new voters who are between the ages of say 18 and 25 or a little bit older than that, who may have been too young to understand what was going on, and they may think that this new India, which is the fifth largest economy in the world, which is the fastest growing big economy in the world, which is an India that is helping other countries rather than always being helped by other countries, they may think this is all normal. And yes, of course it should be normal, but it wasn't. And it wasn't because the government of the day let India down very, very badly. Remember, it was in the UPA era that international agencies called India one of the fragile 5 economies in the world. It was in the UPA era that there were scams galore. Now, how many youngsters will today remember the medical scam? The Medical Council of India was set up to extort people who wanted to get into that sector. Now, today you are seeing new medical colleges being set up all across the country in their dozens and their hundreds, because India traditionally has had a huge shortage of doctors. Now, this misery was being exploited by the government of that day to extort money for corruption. I can tell you more about the coal scam, I can tell you more about the mining scam, we can go on, but I think these tens of millions of younger Indians deserve to understand the context in which this new India is being hailed around the world.
Well, you've talked about scams, so let me just proceed down that route. The coal block scam, the 2G scam, INX media scams highlighted in the report, we all know have ended up not going very far. There have been no convictions, are largely pending trial across the country. So is the linkage to the Congress and UPA politicians a little premature, perhaps even a political exercise, Mr. Panda?
I think yes. Now, let's also keep in mind that the speed of the judicial system is not something that our government can fix overnight. It primarily depends on decisions to be taken by the honorable judiciary itself. Now, remember, the NJAC, which was set up in India with unanimous support from all parties, was struck down by the judiciary, which would have speeded up the process and made it more transparent to appoint judges. Now, that hasn't happened. That's not something that a government alone can fix. The reality is, if you look at the speed of resolution of judicial processes, let's take for example the bad loans and the huge NPAs of the banks. Now, during the UPA era, during that decade, it's no secret that bank chairmen were being appointed for unethical considerations. It's no secret that massive amounts of loans were extended to people who then siphoned off those funds, and many of them ran away from the country. But the reality is, during the Modi government, very strong action has been taken. Now, this is something that can and has happened under the government. It doesn't require the judicial process as much, because the IBC, in the old days, the resolutions of such kind of frauds used to take 25, 50 years. Today, you are seeing resolutions of bankruptcies, resolutions of siphoning off of money under the Money Laundering Act, under the Serious Frauds Investigations Authority, speeded up dramatically, and you are seeing many, many convictions. So, it's surely going to lead to many more convictions, because everybody knows, I think you must have in your days as an anchor even then shown the scenes of how the 2G scam happened, how physical bouncers were used to ensure that only those who were approved of were allowed to bid in time. That kind of corruption has ended, and surely the convictions will follow.
Okay. Let me just ask you pointedly, The opposition questions the timing of the white paper, branding it a political pamphlet. How do you respond to that charge?
The opposition has a black heart, so they will obviously issue black papers. The reality is, this opposition, particularly led by the Congress, is a miserable sham of an opposition. Okay. And they always question the timing because they can't question the merit. Now, let them come out and say that the convictions which have taken place, let them come out and say that the Chara Ghotala did not happen in Bihar. Let them come out and say that Arvind Kejriwal and his people have not scammed Delhi through the excise scam of huge amounts of money. They won't say that because on the merits they can't. So they will only come out with other angularities like timing and all of that. Let's make it very clear. Prime Minister Modi has explicitly said that the country deserves a good opposition. The country deserves an opposition that can place facts before Parliament and before the people of the country and perhaps try to give an alternate vision. But this opposition has only tried to drag down the India story. They have questioned each and every policy decision which has led to the success of India in the eyes of the world and in the eyes of 1.4 billion Indians. That's all they are good at, just to divert and to try and pull down the India story.